Graniola. This is the Graniola channel, and I'd like to tell you a folk tale. These stories are often told to offer encouragement. Yes, you're right to fear sources of evil, but no matter how small or weak you might feel, you do have the ability to protect yourself. This story about a little boy who uses his head is called Collecting Firewood. There was once a grandmother who was in pretty good shape because she lived on a small farm in a very beautiful place where the vegetation was lush, the water was clean, and the animals lived together in harmony. The only family that she had was her very small grandson. The boy was so tiny that if you wore reading glasses, you'd need to put them on to see him. The two of them shared a happy life, and one of the reasons for this was that even though the little one had almost no physical presence, he had a huge intellect, and they never ran out of amusing things to say to each other. Although the land was sparsely populated, both of them were well liked and often got together with friends young and old. The woman was an excellent pastry cook. One morning, when she had finished baking a large group of delicious-smelling cakes, she visited some of the families nearby and asked if the boys, who were around the same age as her grandson, could accompany him on an errand. She divided the cakes between the boys and explained that what she needed was for them to go into the forest and fetch firewood for her oven. They gladly agreed, knowing that if there was no fuel for the baking, there would be no more cakes. Once they had begun to pick up the dry branches, one of the boys asked the minuscule grandson why he wasn't gathering any wood. The tiny one answered, "My granny baked those scrumptious cakes for you so that you would collect sticks for me." The others were fine with that and kept working until they had a huge pile of dried branches. Then each one of them began putting together a pile to carry. That is, each one of them except the tiniest. A sandy-haired youngster asked their companion why he wasn't gathering a bunch to carry. "Well, my granny gave you those treats so that you would all take the fuel back with you." Once again, the four others nodded and continued their task before starting down the path. After taking a few steps, they noticed that their pint-sized chum had not gotten down from the rock where he was sitting. "Hey, come on," said the oldest of the group. "It's getting dark and we must get back to your house." As he said this, he saw that tears were rolling down the grandson's cheek. "I'm too tired to move, and my granny told me that one of you would carry me home." One of the group was much stronger than the others, and he easily placed the teary-eyed child up on his shoulders, and they continued walking. The sun set, and it must have been cloudy because there was no light from either the stars nor the moon, and the five of them quickly realized that they had lost their way. They took a couple of hesitant steps further, and when they did, saw a very dim light shining somewhere off to their left, and a few seconds later heard a dog barking somewhere off to their right. The old woman had repeated on several occasions that her grandson was smaller in size than any of them, but much bigger on gray matter or brains. Not one of the four raised an objection when the eldest asked the brainchild what he thought they should do. "Well, if we move in the direction of the dog, he might jump out and bite us. But if we walk toward the light, it could lead to a house and to protection." They faced to the left and began moving quickly in unison. Reaching a clearing, they saw a small cottage and knocked on the door. After several repetitions, one of them, it could have been the eldest or it might have been the strongest, turned the doorknob and peeked inside. They had all been a bit on edge, and feeling at that moment they had reached a safe haven, they all 5 entered the house and relaxed onto the floor. But their sense of relief was short-lived. Even before they could congratulate each other on their good luck, a terrifying roar vibrated their eardrums. Even worse than its horrific volume were the words that followed. "Who has opened my door?" And "Why does my house suddenly smell like scrumptious little boys?" It was pitch dark, but the smallest of the trespassers did not need to see to be able to know who was talking. His granny had often repeated the tale of the huge, hairy being who lived in the woods and ate small children. It's not all that easy to find children to eat, and when the scary homeowner realized he had a whole group, he thought to himself that he would not want to eat them all at once, but would rather enjoy them in a more leisurely fashion, one by one. He guessed that if they all fell asleep, he could pick them off individually. His voice became sugary. "It seems as if you're lost. It's difficult to travel on such a dark night. I have a lovely guest room, and I'm happy to offer you a place to stay for the night so that you can continue your travels in the morning." 4 of the boys were relieved and delighted, and what with the work of the day and the fright they had all experienced, fell asleep quickly. After a bit of time had passed, it could have been 20 minutes or it may have been half an hour, he opened the bedroom door just a crack and whispered, "Is everyone asleep in there?" The smallest child whispered back, "The others are sleeping quite comfortably, but I'm awake. Each night, once I'm in bed, my grandmother goes to the river with a sieve and brings me back water, and after that I fall asleep." The hairy, scary monster hurried to the kitchen to get a sieve, and then trotted out in the direction of the stream next to his home. When the alert little one heard the sound of the water draining through the sieve, he woke the others and explained that they must quickly run away before their host ate them. They had just crossed the river when the hairy, scary monster looked up and saw them. "Ooh, I'd like to join you. How did you clever boys get to the other side of the river?" he asked in a tone of voice a little less sugary than the one he had used when inviting them to stay. The miniature boy answered, "Just pick up that millstone that's on the bank and put it on top of your head, and then follow us." If you're not familiar with millstones, they are very large and heavy rocks that are used in pairs to grind grain. One of them has a bowl-shaped indentation carved out of one side, and this looked like sort of a hat on the head of the hairy monster for the few seconds before its weight pushed him down below the surface of the water. The boys ran all the way home, and even though they returned without firewood, once they had explained what had happened, everyone was delighted to have such a clever boy in their midst and to have all of them safely home. This is a tale that is told in Azerbaijan, and I have to admit that I had a little trouble locating the 2 land masses that make up that country. But once I did, I happened upon something that has nothing to do with this story, but that I found quite interesting. Thor Heyerdahl of Kon-Tiki fame theorized that thousands of years ago, from the very advanced Azerbaijan area, people traveled over land and water carrying collapsible boats and traveled all the way up to Scandinavia. When you look at the map, I think you'll agree that that would have been an incredibly amazing achievement.